And now, the worldwide phenomenon. One records in Stowmarket, the other records in Houston. Alex Moss, Burton DeWitt join forces to bring you the weekly Dartscast 180.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me as always it is the darts statistician, the darts Strava king, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Well, we just set a record for how long it took us to get started because of Skype problems. But otherwise, I am doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing good too, thank you. Yeah, Patreon subscribers, you can hear all that if we did record it. But no, sun's still shining here, so no complaints from me. Lots to bring you this week. We've got two great guests coming on. Connor Scutt, the newly crowned Denmark Open champion, and also Glen Durrant, the former Premier League champion. Both are going to be joining us later on. But we'll start the show with a look back at the ProTour action that's already happened in Hildesheim earlier this week. Two Players Championship events. Michael Smith winning the first of them, ending an 11-month run without a ranking title in the PDC. He's off the mark, so that brings us nicely onto our question of the week. Sponsored by Condor Darts, will Michael Smith win his third major title in 2024?
It's a hard thing to say yes to right now, even with that title. And I do want to talk about the title first of all, because it was a major step in the right direction for Michael Smith. If you look, he averaged 96.5 across the 7 matches. That's 2.5 points over what he had been doing before this past week in the Players' Championship events. That's a significant improvement. Even still, his seasonal average is 94.38, and it wasn't done on Monday. On Tuesday, he played well as well. Every single match was over 95 again, so still significantly overall above his seasonal average over the course of those couple days. And if he keeps that going, if he keeps averaging in those higher end of the 90s as opposed to the low to mid 90s, he's going to put himself in the competition to win most events. And that's where he should be. He is one of the best players in the world, even if so far he hasn't quite looked it until now. He's looked better in the Premier League. Okay, his average was more in line with what he did on Monday and Tuesday, but it's been good enough, and his timing has been good, and that's why he's in with a chance to make the semifinals, only 2 points behind Michael van Gerwen, and that's the end of my talk about Premier League for this season. But he's been playing at a fairly good standard there. He's also been playing at a fairly good standard on the Euro Tour. Take out that loss to Mike de Decker in his most recent appearance a couple weeks ago, where he averaged in the high 80s and lost 6-2. He's averaged over 94.5 in every other match. He's averaged over his seasonal Players' Championship average in every single one of his Euro Tour matches bar one. He's had a lot of 6-5s and 6-4s, some of which he's lost, tough matches to Josh Rock especially. But he's playing at a fairly good level on the stage, and now it's coming on the floor. But it's still not quite where it was when he became world champion and became world number one, when he became, I should also mention, became Grand Slam champion with that dominant win over Nathan Aspinall, where he was putting himself in that position every single tournament, and we all knew it was a matter of time. Right now, it doesn't quite look like it's a matter of time before he wins another one. More weeks like the past week with that Monday and Tuesday performances will get him there. As that confidence keeps coming back, as those performances keep coming back, he'll be able to translate that over and transfer that over into the televised events. But there's a lot more I need to see. It took him time to learn how to be world number one and play it with that target on his back, and he never fully mastered it. There were moments, there were times where he looked like he was the Michael Smith that was the world number one, but more often it looked like a player who was going through a lost season, and this season seemed like it was off to that same start. But he's now moving in that right direction, and he's not the world number one. He doesn't have that target. It's Luke Humphries who's going through those same pains as Michael Smith did, and maybe now as the pressure eases, Michael Smith will get back to where he was. But right now, I can't say he's looking like he's going to win that third major. He's not anywhere near where he was when he won those first two. That can change. He can prove me wrong. He is one of the 5 best players in the world, even if right now he's not showing it, even if right now I would probably say 10 people are more likely to win a major. But again, it's time for him to prove me wrong.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And looking at our poll on Twitter at the moment, it's open all week, so do go and have your say. 61% are going with no, 39% are going with yes. And when we're talking, we we could have a definitive answer to this question 2 weeks from now. If Michael Smith goes and makes the top 4 in the Premier League next week and then wins the playoffs in London the week after, and at the time of recording, we're recording on a Thursday just before the action in Leeds is about to get underway, 2 points off that top 4, as you mentioned, behind Michael van Gerwen. So by the time you're listening to this, he could well be in that top 4 going into the final week of the season. But if you'd have asked this question maybe a few minutes after Michael's first game on Monday, I think that 61% would have been a little bit higher, because he posted on Twitter after winning his first round game, "Don't you just love gout? More painkillers required, please, so I can actually lean while throwing. Feel sorry for my opponent there, as I think he felt sorry for me." And his first game averaged 92, battled through the pain barrier, and he won 6 more games. He won the title, and the highlights, he had that 106 average against Johnny Clayton, the 109 against Luke Woodhouse, and some of the bursts that he had to win those games as well. The game against Clayton, from 4-all, a 13 and a 11 darter to win it 6-4 against Woodhouse, 3-2 up. He had 11, 13 and 12 dart legs to win 3 of the next 4 legs and win it 6-3, and some tough moments towards the end. 4-2 down to Krzysztof Ratajski, won 5 legs on the spin, and only one of those legs was more than 14 darts. And in the final with Ryan Joyce, looked to be a step too far when he was 5-3 down, and he could have been further behind as well. But from 5-all, pulled out his 3 best legs of the match, a 12 darter on throw. And both times that Ryan Joyce was waiting on a finish, he was waiting on 16 after 12. Michael Smith won it, and then he had that 14 dart to break, and it was a crucial final leg there, because he had a maximum of 140, helped him get that break and win it 8-6, and it didn't have to go to that final leg. But an 88 average in the end in that final, which he admitted wasn't good enough, but he did say he was more than happy to win the title, his first ranking title since June last year. And it's been a long time between titles for a player who is now back at world number 2 this week, ahead of Michael van Gerwen. But Michael Smith, you look at his 2024, you look at his ranking events, he has skipped the last 2 Euro Tours, but he's played in practically everything else. And ahead of this week, 4 Euro Tours, 8 Players Championships, the UK Open, so that's 13 events yet to reach a quarter-final. So based on that form, it would be difficult to argue that case that Michael Smith is on track to win these major titles again. But a title of any sort, which he picked up this week, that is going to give him some confidence, because we know this isn't the best version of Michael Smith we've seen. He knows that as well. But as you say, is that step in the right direction for him, winning a title? And it just reminds him that he can walk into a venue. He might not be at 100% like he posted on social media during the event, but he did end up being the last player standing. So winning a major, yes, a much bigger task than winning a Players' Championship. So I'm not quite ready to say yes for this question, but in a few months' time, if he can make further steps forward with his game, put more of those consistent runs together, then I'm sure we are soon going to be considering Michael Smith as that serious major contender again.
Well, it wasn't just Michael Smith who won a title in Germany this past week in the Players' Championship events, as it was a 9th Players' Championship triumph and 10th PDC title overall for the former Northern Irish number 1, Brendan Dolan. He still has ambitions to reach not just Northern Ireland number 1, but number 1 overall, win his first TV title, win his first Euro Tour title. How many, though, of those 3 things do you think he can take off the list?
Yeah, some big ambitions there, isn't it? And I'll just throw a couple of stats at you guys as well. These are courtesy of the Redbit 180 on Twitter. Michael Smith, who we just spoke about on Monday, becoming the 8th player to win 20 tournaments on the Pro Tour. And on Tuesday, Brendan Dolan, as you say, his 10th title on the Pro Tour, the 19th player to reach double figures. So it's a great achievement for the history maker, another string to his bow, and someone that, clues in the name, he's already written his name in the history books with that double start 9 darter at the World Grand Prix way back in 2011. But Brendan did make the final that Grand Prix, and I was looking, he went into that final with Phil Taylor, yet to win a PDC title, and didn't get off the mark until 2 years later, 2013, his 9th ranking final, got over the line and won a title on the floor. And that first title, those Players' Championships that weekend, were held on the same weekend as the Masters, when all of the top 16 were missing. He beat Ricky Evans in the final, and then a month later, doubled up beating, get ready for it, Jamie Robinson in the final. We got him in there. But more than a decade later, Brendan Dolan still mixing it with the best, winning these titles on the floor and claiming scalps in the majors as well. Last year, beat Michael van Gerwen at the World Match Play, Ali Pally in December. He sent Gerwin Price home, he sent Gary Anderson home, and then he ended up losing to Luke Littler in the quarterfinals. And his interview after winning that title this week, he did mention the younger players like Luke Littler. One of the reasons for what is keeping him going and striving for more success in the game. And he said the talent of the young lads coming through is unbelievable. It's actually rejuvenated me. There's still plenty left for me to achieve. I've been playing at this level for 20 years now. As you touched on there, you'd still love to be world number one. It may never happen, but I'll keep trying. I would also love to win a TV title and a European Tour event. So that will be my ambition going forward. I think the world number one, probably too much of a reach for Brendan, but those other two goals, you could see them happening. The Euro Tour, it's not been a happy hunting ground in recent years for Brendan. 2022, 2023, and so far this year, played in 20 of them, made just the one quarter-final. He is a former finalist on the Euro Tour. It's going back to 2013, but he's proven that he can make the final of these events. As for a TV title, this Players' Championship win, it is put him firmly on track to be in quite a few of the majors this year. And it's also a very close race at the moment to be Josh Rock's partner for that Northern Ireland team in the World Cup next month. Brendan beat Daryl Gurney on the way to the title. He's edged him ahead of him in the rankings. I think there's 2 more Euro Tours before the cut-off. But if Brendan can hold on to that spot, him and Josh Rock, it will be Josh's debut. Brendan, one of the few ever presents in the World Cup. That could be a real dark horse partnership, and maybe that could be where he gets that TV title.
It's tough to see him reaching world number one, like you said. And I don't mean that as a negative. Very few people can reach world number one. He's a former top 10 player. And he's probably better now than he was when he was a top 10 player, which I think goes to the depth of the game. But he's not the best player in the world, and he's certainly not consistently the best player in the world, even if he has moments where he is. That's why he's won 10 titles. If you win 10 titles, that means you are good enough on any given day to be the best player in the world. You can fluke a title. You might even be able to fluke 2. You're not going to fluke 10 titles. That is something that shows his true class, and to have been able to do it over an extended period of time, to be able to do it really in multiple different spurts. He had 5 titles over a 2-year period, 2013, 2014, and he's had 5 since 2019, after a huge gap where he fell out of even qualifying by right to the World Championships one year. It shows, though, the class he's had and his ability to relift his game and refine his game and move back towards the top. But if you look at his seasonal averages in the Players' Championship events over the past 6 years, going back to 2019 where he reemerged, 94.5, 94.5, 96.5, 93, 93.5, and this year he's just nudged 95 again. That's consistent. That's good. Even the bad year in there, 2022 at 93.01, that's not terrible. That's still top 64 quality. It still did enough overall to qualify for the World Match Play, to qualify for the World Grand Prix. And it shows his consistency even when he's not playing at his best to find ways to get results. But it's not the type of averages that we look at for top 10 players, let alone the world number one. 95 is a much better performance, and it shows that maybe he's lifting his game again. Maybe it's getting back to where it was when he was probably playing at his best in 2021, a few years ago with that 96.5. But again, that was still nowhere near the very top of the game. Is it good enough if he's playing at his best to win a Euro Tour? Absolutely. It's also good enough to win a televised event. I mean, he made the semifinals in Minehead not that long ago, losing out to Ryan Searle, who then came within a leg of beating Peter Wright in the final. So it's, he's still a player that can open up any given draw, and if the draw opens up for him, can take advantage. And it will only take that all going right on any given weekend, or if it's, the World Grand Prix again, a full week, for it to translate into a major. He absolutely can check that off. He absolutely can check off a Euro Tour, but it still seems less likely than likely. I think there are too many players who overall are better than him and are more consistent than he is. And that makes me say the one that he's most likely to check off is Euro Tour, but I'm going to say he's not going to check off any of them. He can prove me wrong. Just like I told Michael Smith, go and prove me wrong. I'll say the same to Brendan Dolan. And, if he was playing at this level 10 years ago, I think he would have won one of those by now. He's a better player now than when he was in the top 10 in the world, and he's nowhere near the top 10 right now. That's a sign of how, as he said, the increase in quality and the skill and talent of these young players has rejuvenated him and motivated him. But overall, it means he's further down the rankings and further down that list. He can win something. He's good enough. He's won 10 titles. That's not a fluke. That's the sign of a true class player. But I'm going to say he's going to do none of the three. And again, I'm ready to be proven wrong.
Well, there you go, Brendan. If you are listening, there's a little bit of extra motivation to prove Burton wrong and go and tick them things off. Well, we'll be back in a moment. We're going to continue our look back at what's happened in the last week in darts with the development tour. But before we do, let's bring in our first guest. He is the former three-time Lakeside champion, the former Premier League champion. He's now a pundit and commentator. Here's our chat with Glen Durrant. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the former Premier League champion turned pundit and commentator Glen Durrant. Thanks for the time again, Glen. How are you doing?
Yes, anytime, and absolutely fantastic speaking to you as always.
Great to get you on. Lots to get to. We're talking in the midst of a busy week on the Pro Tour. We've just had the two Players' Championships. You're going to be heading off to Germany to commentate on the European Tour this weekend. How's your prep going for the weekend ahead in the commentary box?
Yeah, no, like I said, I did a Euro tour last week, and I'm learning all the time. I think sometimes I can be too focused on stats, too focused on preparation, and forget about what's happening in front of your eyes as well. So I'm learning to have the confidence of telling the story of what we're seeing there, rather than, Burton DeWitt's on 10% of every time he's gone for double five this year. Maybe I was trying too hard on the sort of the numbers there, whereas now I'm just beginning to tell a story on there. So I feel like I'm evolving.
When we last had you on the show, we were talking at the Target launch back in September last year, and we called you the busiest commentator in darts. You'd called the Modus Super Series, the Pro Tours, the Women's Series, and we said, when is that call-up going to come for some TV work in the PDC? Well, a few weeks later, we find out you'd been invited to join the Sky Sports team at the Grand Slam. How did that move come about?
It was a story which I don't think I've told so far, but I got a call off a guy called Henry on the Sky Sports podcast, the Dart Show podcast, and I went down and I moaned because it was a 5-hour journey. I caught every bit of traffic, just got to the Sky Sports studio. I then did it, and it was about 25 minutes, 30 minutes with, I think it was with Bridgie or Dan Dawson and Emma Burton, and then I went back and I caught every traffic from London to Middlesbrough, and it was like a 12 or 14 hour day's trip for like a half-hour podcast, and I moaned and complained. But if I hadn't have gone, there was something that they saw in that podcast that they liked about me. I got a message a couple of days later, would I be interested in doing a little bit of work at the Grand Slam? And they gave me the Friday, Saturday, Sunday and the Monday, like 3 days work. And yeah, when I finished the Grand Slam, I was like, did I do okay? And then literally on the Tuesday, would I be interested in 10 to 12 days at Ali Pali? So yeah, never more. That was something I learned big style there. And you're just the right place at the right time.
And it was great to see you get that call up for those major events. Just going back to that Grand Slam, what was it like those first games stepping into the commentary box? Were there more nerves, or did you feel completely prepared after all the games that you'd called in the other events?
You wouldn't believe, Alex, if I told you how nervous I was out, you wouldn't believe. I think when you're a dart player, you get there 4 hours before, and then you're really nervous early doors. But by the time you settle in, maybe 2 hours hard practice, the destiny's in your hands. You feel good. Whereas those nerves continued as a pundit, as a commentator, and you're up against people I've listened to, Wade Bardle, Rod Studd, I think, with me opening couple that I've worked with, and you're hearing their voices and you're using their terms, the big fish, the champagne shot, because you've only heard them saying it. Oh, come on now, because that's all you think of when you think of Wade Bardle. So they were very, very, very nerve wracking, and I sort of come back in, and it was just. I was expecting, do we all high five each other? And, just someone said, oh, do you want a bacon sandwich, Glen? And I was like, well, am I going to get something? How do you think I did? And I just felt part of the team quite quickly there. And, just stopped being too hard on myself. And just made sure I got the first line right. Whatever I said, it was like a bit of a settler. And, from there, I've just sort of, just tried to be me.
Glad to hear it, and you must have impressed the bosses at Sky. As you mentioned, you got the call up to do some work at Ali Pali as well at the World Championship. What was that experience like, going back to that iconic venue but in a different role this time?
Yeah, it was insane, and by now I've got a bit of confidence. Now, the mistakes, because I was able to make mistakes at the Motor Super Series. I was probably able to make mistakes at the Pro Tours, and I sort of, was confident in myself at the Ali Pali that I didn't want to be Wayne Mardle, I didn't want to be Mark Webster, and I was creating my own style. And so come Ali Pali, I was confident I was going to do a really good job. But like I said, social media can be brutal. But this time, I think, it's like when I started losing as a dart player, there was an awful lot of love for me. When you're winning games, it's tough. Social media sometimes really, really tough. And they always say, Britain loves a good loser. And all of a sudden, I've got new fans now because I'm going through this. But when it came to the commentary, I thought, here we go again. But, and I think it was Dan Dawson that said, look, Glenn, 5% of the people you would never, ever impress. 5% of the people you can do nothing wrong. It's that 90% in between. And like I say, just be yourself. And like I say, I just began to get a bit more confidence.
Well, that World Championship, it was lit up by a young man by the name of Luke Littler. He was at that target launch I mentioned earlier. His life is a lot different now after his run to the final at Ali Pali. When we're talking, he's top of the Premier League. But when did you first come across the name Luke Littler and hear about how talented this boy was?
Oh, maybe as long as 5 years ago, because of Target and because I sit on Dart Connect like a geek anyway, so whether it was development tours, and as a coach I'm working with a lot of development tour players as well, so Luke Littler was a name I didn't expect. The explosion that happened at the Worlds, and I thought the draw opened up with losses for players like James Wade and Jim Williams very early doors. Was it Danny Knock? But maybe it just opened up, and I thought, hey, something interesting could be happening here. But it's no fluke. I mean, to then go to the World Series of Dart, the 9 Darters, the Premier League, wins on the Pro Tour, wins on the Euro Tour. It's a generational talent that I'm just enjoying, just like every fan out there. He's something very, very special.
Yeah, and you've said on Twitter as well recently you've never enjoyed watching darts more thanks to Luke Littler. There's been some impressive debut seasons in the PDC before, yourself being one of them, Rob Cross, Stephen Bunting, but how impressed have you been with how Luke has followed up that run at Ali Pali and continues to make even more progress week by week?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure the answers about the quality. It's just more the quality of him. I think he must have a heart rate of about 50 because he must have like low anxiety issues, because when the high pressure situation comes, he looks absolutely no different, as if he's enjoying the challenge, that the tougher it's getting. Good people around him, really good manager. I was chatting with his dad for the first time last week, and they said that the manager's doing some fantastic things and he's not overworking him. I remember when I won my first Lakeside, I then went and done 72 exhibitions, and he killed myself working full time and going from John O'Groats to wherever, and Land's End. He's doing things a little bit differently. You know what I mean? He's doing some really some corporate stuff, and I just think he's got the right people around him. His dad's got incredible belief in him, and it's a real team. And I think he's just chilled.
Well, let's get back to you then. And you're a busy man, as we know, with your coaching, exhibitions, commentary work. You still play the occasional tournament as well. We've seen you in the seniors and the Modus this year. But I want to know, as far as your work as a commentator, do you have a standout game or moment already that you put at the top?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely adore my Modus Super Series. I mean, what used to be once a month is now once every 12 weeks maybe, but I ain't giving it up unless I've been told I have to. But there was a match with Darryl Pilgrim where he went, I think I'd done some commentary for about an hour, where he smashed in the record average there of about 121, and then sort of his next game he banged in a 9-darter as well. So despite all the glitz and glamour of the Euro Tour last week, where the atmosphere was just incredible, Joe Cullen, Luke Littler, the noise was insane. The matches at Christobi in particular, Ali Pali, was just breathtaking to watch how far he's come on. Yeah, I think my favourite moment is like I say, going back to in front of absolutely nobody at the Motor Super Series, and that hour from Darryl Pilgrim of pure brilliance.
Some great darts. And speaking of exhibitions, one date in the diary we know about in July in Blackpool, the Bullseye event being organised by your niece Zara and her partner Lee Fox. We had the pleasure of chatting with them both on the show a few months ago to talk about their work getting darts as a recognised sport in the armed forces. How proud are you of the work they've done in trying to grow the game in the military?
Yeah, one thing about Zara, you can barely get a word in edgeways, the passion that she's got. And I think she took a bit of a knock, and I haven't heard from her as much, but I think they've got a venue and everything now. And yeah, she's a typical Durrant, really. She really is. When she sees something, she goes for it. And anybody who can get the Damon Heta, Dimitri Van den Berg, Mac Elkin, and all those players last year for not even the price of petrol. I mean, that just shows you the power of persuasion from Zara. She has a real determination to succeed. And a part of Foxy now is really good friends in Team Mac Elkin now. I think he sort of travels a little bit. He's in our WhatsApp group, and he's involved there. So yeah, the passion and desire Zara's got is second to none. And I just think she's reining it in a little bit as well now. Like I said, at first I was like, I can't understand a word she's saying. She's speaking so quickly here, but she's a passionate, and she'll succeed. She's a real winner.
Yeah, it's one of our favourite chats we've had this year. And away from the commentary side of things, you also joined the PDPA board in January. Just talk to us a little bit about the role you've taken on and how that's gone so far.
Well, it's year one, and they made it very, very clear that year one is about just sitting back and being mentored and getting involved in Zoom meetings, etc. I feel I'm relevant. I'm still in that PDPA directors. I'm still the last player to hold a card. Jamie Caven is on the board as well, and I'm itching to get involved. But what I didn't realise is, as a dart player, we moan at the PDPA. We pay a levy. It used to be 3%, now down to 2%. God, do they work hard. Like I said, I'm in I know exactly what's going on, and I want to get involved in certain things, but it's very clear that year one is even just understanding what the PDPA is about, reading the website, looking at the policies and procedures. They often open up the Zoom meetings to say, Glenn, what's your thoughts? So I'm involved, but like I said, the work, Peter Manley, Alan Warren in particular, Andy Scott, Jackson Newell, I mean, the work, like Trojans, they really do the work the socks off. And I'm looking forward to progressing that in the future as well, and on top of a busy workload I've got already.
Yeah, a busy workload, and we've got a few listener questions before we let you go. Warren Allsworth asks, is Glenn going to continue playing some of the TV Senior Tour events, and might he be tempted by the floor events? You played some good stuff against Flash at the Tavern.
Yeah, good question. I played lovely at an exhibition on Friday, but I've still got a problem with my throw technique-wise, and I don't want to be gifted positions at the seniors for players who are playing on the floor, as you mentioned. They're trying to get qualification. I just, it was good at the beginning because I know I sell tickets. I know that people from Middlesbrough will travel, and I took an incredible amount to York last year, where I did give Jim McEwen a run for the money. But the bottom line, I don't enjoy playing darts no more. The fire in the belly is not no more. I've got a real sort of philosophy that I've done my bit. Now it's over at our Jamie, and the next crop of players and next crop of Durrants coming through and whatever, and I don't have that what I used to have, and that feeling of when I go and commentate on Michael van Gerwen versus Luke Humphreys. I mean, that's the fire in the belly I used to get as a player. But I think I'll be playing another seniors TV this year. I will be definitely commentating on the next one for sure. And like I said, I'll be prepared, I'll be ready. But let's say I went to an exhibition Friday, felt really comfortable, was averaging round about 90 for the night, and then I got pummeled in one game by a local player as well. So it's up and down, but the fire in the belly's not there.
Well, sticking with your darts, the next one comes from Charlie Gray. Says, what made you decide to go back to the pair flight from the standard?
Well, that's actually the kite I'm using, Charlie. Charlie's followed my career an awful lot. I was never a tinkerer. I probably used 3 darts in all my life, and it's probably a sign of where the mentality is. I think as a player, as a coach now, I say to people, going out and putting a pair flight on is not going to make you a better player overnight. If you've got the balance of your dart right, and when you're playing well, you should be able to throw sausages. So you could see that my mind was just not right, and I was going from a Dimitri barrel to a standard flight to a pair flight to a long point that's just indicative of where my mindset was at. And now I'm back to the absolute originals, where what I won the Premier League with, etc. But I'm no better. It's just, like I said, it's just if you're not putting the hours in, the practice in, you're not going to get an awful lot out of it.
And two more from our listeners. Elliot wants to know, what does the feedback process from the players to the PDPA look like, and can he give examples of times where this has been influential in decisions?
Well, like I said, there's so much going on, and we do listen to the players. I mean, what I would say, Elliot, as a player, I moaned about the PDPA. I hated giving 2% of my prize money every time. We do listen. I mean, I know there's going to be criticism that, yeah, the PDC will take on board what you've said, but the PDC will do what they want anyway. I joined the PDPA because I want to make a difference. I spoke with Nathan Aspinall, who sort of said, you know, it's a job that it is for you, Glenn. I feel like I could come to you and speak to you about things, and you know that's the reason behind it. So I'm not going to be a yes man. I worked in housing for 30 years, and you know, like customer involvement, you know, player engagement is really important. And the PDC want to hear what the players have got to say, rather than just the tittle tattle on social media or behind the back. So if I can facilitate and if I can speak to the PDPA and say this player's come with this question, do you think they would make their product better, then I'll do that.
And the last one, I think you like this one, comes from George Dobson, who says, who's the bigger Borough fan, Glenn or Burton? Maybe a quick quiz or a Parmo eating challenge?
Well, I think I'd win the Parmo eating challenge. I'll take that, but I think Burton's maybe the bigger. I mean, I'm on the doorstep and still only got the 2 games this year. But like I said, when I used to wear the red and white shirt, and you know, when I took the Lakeside trophy onto the Riverside pitch, it was still up there in the top 3 moments of my sporting darting life, that's for sure.
Good times. Well, Glenn, always a pleasure to get you on the show. We appreciate you taking the time, and we wish you all the best with what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks very much.
Thanks again to Glenn for joining us and continuing our look back at the last week in darts and to the development tour. We had 5 tournaments played over the weekend, 5 different winners: Roman Benecke, Gian Van Veen, Wessel Nyman, Nathan Rafferty and Nico Springer picking up the 5 titles from the 5 events. But which players caught your eye the most from the weekend?
I think there's one very, very obvious answer, and I assume he's number 1 on your list. I assume he's number 1 on anyone's list who paid any attention to what was happening, and that's Wessel Nyman. What can you say? Not just about the weekend, but so far across the 2 weekends on the development tour. Only 2 players so far this year have averaged over 90 across the first 10 events. In fact, you could say even over 89.5. One of them is Gian Van Veen, who's knocking on the top 32 in the world. He's very soon going to be ineligible to play the development tour because he's going to be in the top 32 of the overall order of merit. So, we expect that. Sure, he's not playing at the exact same standard that he's playing in the Pro Tour events, but that's, again, to be expected because you don't need to be averaging 95 every match to have a chance to win a development tour match. There'll be some you do, but often you can get away with 83 average and cruise to a 4-0 win. So that's why, Gian Van Veen's averaging 92.35. The other player averaging over 89.5 is Wessel Nyman. And it's not just that he's averaging, 89.51 or 90.51 or 91 or 92. He's averaging 94 on the dot. He's more than 1.5 points ahead of Gian Van Veen, and he's nearly 5 points ahead of anyone else. That is just brutally good. And look at what he did over the weekend. 9 matches across the 5 events where he averaged north of a ton. He made it to at least the last 16 in 4 of the 5 events. And the only one he didn't was because he went out to a tour card holder in Owen Bates, who had winning leg lengths of 15, 14, 12, and 14. And okay, Nyman did terrible on his end. He only threw a 10-darter in that match. That's what it takes to knock him out before the last 16. You have to have every winning leg be 15 darts or fewer, and even still, Nyman's going to throw a 10-darter in there. He has just been brilliant. And take a look at that final against Nico Springer. It went the distance, but Nyman won it from 4-2 down, and his winning leg lengths in that match yet again, were all 15 or fewer. In fact, 14 or fewer. 13, 12, 13, 14, and 12 were his winning leg lengths, in averaging 113. He was either left on a double or had just missed the bullseye, leaving 25 in the 4 legs he lost. It was an absolute world-class performance from a player who's brought world-class performances pretty much each event on the development tour this year. I don't remember anyone being this dominant across 10 events on the development tour because, well, it just doesn't happen. It is a brilliant performance, and it didn't just catch one of my eyes. It caught both of them. So there's really not any room to say anyone else. But you did say players in the question, so I'll make another statement for Nico Springer. Winning a title in the last event, making another final, obviously that one against Nyman where he had no chance. Also losing with over a ton-plus average against Cam Crabtree in the first event. Just another really good weekend for him, and that's why he's now third in averages on the development tour. It's why he's putting himself in that position to get a tour card next year. And I think he'll be able to push on because he's still improving. He's still getting better. And now he's getting some results to go with it. He caught half my eye, we'll say, because Wessel Nyman caught the other eye and a half. And if you have any other answers, well, you're just wrong because Wessel Nyman's really the only person you need to look at this past weekend.
Well, I'm going to mention Wessel Nyman, but I'm going to start with someone else, and you just brought him up there, and that is Nico Springer, because it's been a long time coming for him winning one of these titles. He lost 2 development tour finals in 2021, 2 more in 2022, and then his 5th attempt that you mentioned there, that game with Wessel Nyman, the 113 average from Wessel. I'll come back to him in a moment, but it was 6 times the charm for the German on Sunday, and to do it against Gian van Veen as well, the man. You could say he's the man to beat. You have got Wessel in there as well, but Gian is top of that development tour order of merit. He was top of it last year. He went back to the top spot during the weekend, and it was a nervy final to begin with. Both players missing doubles in the first 2 legs, but Nico winning both of them, then a 107 finish for 3-0, and from that point played a very solid game. He needed 2 holes to throw, did them in 15 and 13 darts. Both times Van Veen, he was down to a 2-darter 80 and 64, but Nico held his nerve to win the title, and we've seen him a few times on the Euro Tour, the 9-darter in the German Super League last year as well, and he's a very talented player, and at his age 23, he's put his education first. He's not fully pursued a full-time career as a darts player yet. You've only got to look at the last 3 Q schools. He's played the first day of the first stage, and then he said, right, that's enough, I'm not playing anymore, but it does look like he is committing himself more to the game this year. He's played the first 2 weekends of the development tour. He missed all of that tour last year. The Challenge Tour, he's not played it since 2021. He's played the first 2 weekends of this year's one, and just looking at that development tour order of merit, the title, he's put him up to 6th, and most importantly, when you take out all the players with tour cards, it's him and Danny Jansen. They are occupying those 2 spots for the tour card, so he's in a very good position. And the man that stopped Nico the day before, you mentioned him, Wessel Nyman, that 113.03 average in the final, and Nico, it looked like he had a match start to beat him as well in that game, but for Wessel, the 113, it is a record for a development tour final in the Dart Connect era since 2018. Josh Rocky had the record before, 112, but Wessel beating that record and topping the averages. He did that on the development tour last year ahead of Luke Littler and Gian van Veen, who took a lot of the headlines last year. But yeah, he's top of the averages again after 2 weekends. Looks like he's upped his game even more than he did last year on the development tour, up to that 94 average. And for a lot of these players, I believe it is their last year playing on this circuit. So for him, it's going to be that one last crack at the World Youth Championships. Obviously, we know he missed out on a few years while he was banned, but boy, has he come back strong from it. And it's another competitive field this year. But I do see Wessel and Gian fighting it out for that top 2. And you touched on it, Gian, we might not be seeing him for too much longer in the development tour. He is very close to that top 32. So it could be Wessel's to win really from there. But Gian up to 9 titles on the development tour. Nathan Rafferty deserves a mention, up to 11 now, joint 3rd on that all-time list, and you've got to admire the longevity for him as well, because he won his first development tour title in 2018, so 6 years ago, and 6 years on still winning these titles. And yeah, like Westall, his last year he is a beaten finalist in the World Youth, so he'd love to have a crack at that final again. And I just want to give a mention to one more player as well. Actually, he lost in the final of the first event to Roman Benecki, but Thomas Banks, on the very start of his journey in the development tour, really still only 17. You might remember he played Gerwyn Price at the UK Open last year, one of the Riley's qualifiers. I think he's got a very bright future in the game, and making a final at this early age is a sign that already he's showing that he means business on the development tour.
Now, we haven't talked much about the WDF this year. I know we talked a little for the Dutch Open. We've talked a bit about it from time to time, but it's only 7 months now till the World Championships, and Connor Scutt just won the Denmark Open to book a return to the Lakeside. Probably wasn't the number one story coming out of that, but we've talked about the number one story. But still a long way to go before the cutoff. But looking at the provisional field for the Lakeside, who do you see as the leading contenders right now for the men's title?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and you're going to hear from Connor in a moment and hear just how pleased he was to win the Denmark Open at the weekend. I can't remember if we were talking about it on air or off air, but I was discussing with him his decision to enter the event, because he doesn't play too many WDF events. He's only just lost his tour card, but before then didn't really play in many of them, and he said it was the last gold ranked event before the cut-off for Lakeside, so it was that last chance to win one event and get that automatic spot in the field, and that's what he's gone and done, and guaranteed to be at the Lakeside in December. He now wants to push up those rankings, be a seed, and avoid that first round and that short race, the first of two sets, which it is for that opening round of the men's event. And he went into Lakeside 2 years ago on his debut. That weekend there is so many games squeezed in over those 2 days. A lot of players there starting their campaigns, and it can be frenetic at times, as Connor found out against Mr. Intensity, Sean Burt, losing 2-0 in the first round. And back then Connor had his tour card in the PDC. I think it was 5 or 6 other players they were allowed by the PDC to still play in the event, so he went in as one of the favourites, and I think he will be in a similar position when we get to December. He's going to be up there as one of the leading contenders, but he's going to now be a more experienced player. He's had those 2 years on the tour in the PDC, played at Ali Pali in December. That occasion didn't seem to overawe him, a 95 average in the first round, so I think he's going to be a lot more settled second time round at Lakeside. And just quickly touching on his run to the title on Saturday as well, semi-final a 96 average, the final a 98, almost 99. He saved his best until last. And looking elsewhere, looking at that provisional list, a lot can change between now and the cut-off in October. But you've got Jarno Bottenberg, who won that Dutch Open this year. He caught the eye at Lakeside last year as well. Looking back at last year's Lakeside, Dennis Nielsen, a semi-finalist, he beat Wesley Placier, who's that current WDF number one, 4-1 with a 97 average in the quarterfinals. He twice went to set up against Andy Bartons in the semi-finals as well before he came back and lost that. And there are some players that could still qualify for Ali Pali, maybe opt for that one instead of the Lakeside. I'm looking at the likes of Ben Robb from New Zealand, Leonard Gates, Wesley Placier, who I just mentioned, Paul Lim in that provisional field at the moment. They'll fancy their chances of winning through those international qualifiers to get to the PDC's World Championships. But right now, I don't think there is a standout favourite. We went into last year's Lakeside, Andy Bartons. He was the clear favourite. So maybe we'll see someone go and win a bunch of titles in these next 5 or 6 months and change that. We know we've got the World Masters coming back in October. That was announced by the WDF last week. So maybe someone from that list, if they were to go and win the Masters, do it in impressive fashion, you'd fancy them to go and do the double at Lakeside a couple of months later. But right now, 6 months or so away, I'm getting a feeling this is going to be a tournament. It could be similar to 2022 where Neil Duff won it. We go into it with no real favourite as such, but a pool of players that all have that genuine shout of winning it. And Connor Scutt, he's got to be one of the names in the mix.
Well, his name is only in the mix if he doesn't qualify for the PDC World Championship, which is still a possibility. Right now, he's about 3,500 pounds behind Andy Bolton for the second, or sorry, behind. Right now, Danny Janssen is actually in the field through the ProTour order of merit, but assuming he falls out, he's then 3,500 behind Andy Bolton and 1,600 behind Aidan Kirk for one of the World Championship spots this year. And he can do that. He's obviously good enough. He was on the tour last year, made a Pro Tour final last year. It wasn't enough to save his tour card, nearly was. But if he can find some hot form, he can get himself into that top 2 and qualify for the PDC World Championship, which you have to think would take the priority over going to the Lakeside. But if he's in the field, for the exact same reason, he would be one of the top names there. But there's other players in that list right now who I think would have every chance to win it. Wesley Plessier, I think, is probably one of the 4 or 5 best players without a tour card right now. Currently would be the 4th seed at the Lakeside, and I think would be absolutely live to win the title. And so too, I think with Thomas Younghans, he's a player that we've seen some good stuff from. I don't know how he'll do over a longer match, but he's right now 5th in the WDF rankings. And he's more experienced, obviously, than he's ever been before. But overall, looking at the field for the Lakeside, especially on the men's tournament, it really makes for some grim reading. And I said that before last year, and I'm saying it again now. A lot of these players, I don't know who they are, and they're currently in the seeds. Who is Danny Porter of Australia? And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean that as if you don't follow these regional circuits, you won't know who these players are. I mean, the other Australian players, I only know because I've seen them play before. Peter Machin, of course, having won the World Trophy, close to a decade ago now. But we've seen very little of him other than that. I hope that the winner becomes Paul Lim. Wouldn't that be great? Paul Lim qualifying for another World Championship and going on and winning it just shy of his 70th birthday. That would be a great story. But I don't think right now he's playing at the highest level of these. Dennis Nielsen, also in the field, had that great run last year, but consistency's always been his problem. And whether he can string it together, string 5 or 6 great matches together, is something that we just don't know whether he can do. But I just don't know. I haven't been following the WDF, and the little I have has made me really not feel any need to follow it any closer.
And now we'll move on to our final guest on this week's show. He is the winner of the Denmark Open at the weekend. He has qualified for the Lakeside. Here's our chat with Connor Scutt. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the newly crowned Denmark Open champion, Connor Scutt. Thanks for the time again, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm all good. Happy to be off of aeroplanes.
Well, there is only one place to start, and that is with the weekend. You're on aeroplanes, you're winning the Denmark Open, and with it, a guaranteed spot at the WDF World Championships in December. A few days on now, you're back home. How do you reflect on winning the title?
Good. It was good stuff. I mean, it's my first ever ranking win anywhere, ever, which Nick Rolls pointed out on the microphone. But it was nice to find out that I qualified for the World Masters as well, not just Lakeside. I got a World Masters spot, which was good.
Come back to that winner a little bit later on, but as we were just chatting off there, lots to catch up on since we last had you on the show in November, just before Minehead, just before your debut in the PDC World Championship. And we know you've been on that Ali Pali stage before, 2016, part of the Unicorn Next Gen team, being introduced to the stage. But what was it like making that walk, 7 years later, to play in the biggest tournament in darts?
It was very different. There was a few more thousand people there, I think. Yeah, it was great. It's something I look back on very fondly, and hopefully one day I'll get back up there.
And as far as debuts go, it couldn't have gone much better in that first round. 95 average, 64% on the doubles, a 138 finish. Some might say the best 138 ever in a World Championship. What did it mean to you to put on that level of performance on such a big stage?
It was good. I didn't feel like I played great in the first 2 sets from memory. Then on my walk back onto the stage, I took a look up at the stats because they were displayed on the big screens. I looked up and I was like, oh, okay, 95 ain't too bad, and it was good.
And you lost out to Gerwyn Price in the next round. That brought an end to your 2 years with your first tour card. And I remember when we spoke last time, you said that the PDC is where you want to be, but it's not the be all and end all having that tour card. So how were you feeling going back to Q School to try and win it back? I think I put a bit too much pressure on myself this year at Q School to try and win it back. I think I got a little bit stressed with it all for no apparent reason. I think I was desperate to get it back.
But there's a lot more other events and things that I can play in. I haven't stopped playing darts. It doesn't stop you from playing. It's just there's other avenues where you can play more, which is good. It's good that darts is in a position just under the professional level to go and still be able to play.
That probably answers our next question as well, because in the end you did finish just a point short of that tour card. But did you feel hard done by not having to come away with a card, or were you already moving on to what else you had in store for this year?
I felt a little bit hard done by losing it by a point, but it was a difficult one. I think on the first day I put in some good performances, and I think I averaged 100 and something in a game and lost. Whereas if I had won that game, I would have kept my card if I had mirrored results the next few days. It was strange. I was hitting a lot one minute and then nothing another minute. It was. I think I put maybe a bit too much effort in on the practice board and didn't just relax and treat it like any other event.
Well, you touched on it. Even without that tour card, it's arguably been a busier year for you already, both on and off the Oki. We'll start with on the Oki. We've seen plenty of you on the Challenge Tour and the Modus Super Series. What's it been like getting your teeth stuck into those two events again?
I realise exactly how spoilt you are having a tour card, because on the 2 years you sort of forget what you were doing with the Modus and the Challenge Tour and things like that. I love the Modus and the Challenge Tours. I think all the officials do their jobs and run them things perfectly. But Challenge Tour, they're long old days, and you sort of think, oh well, at a Pro Tour, if I made a quarter final at a Pro Tour, it was a very good day. If you make a quarter final at a Challenge Tour, it doesn't feel quite as good. Especially the money isn't it doesn't mirror it and things like that. So it's a much longer day for, well, monetary wise, much smaller reward, which is kind of strange after 2 years of having, like, you get a good run and you know that you're going to get paid okay.
Well, we've got to mention as well the 9-darter attempt in the Modus, a 180 followed by the 171, 3 treble 19s. Then you're attempting the 150 with 3 balls. You missed the first ball, but is that route something that you've managed to do before?
It is in practice ages and ages ago. When I was first at the Modus back in Southampton, I'd done it in the practice room there. I went 180, 171, 3 balls. And me and my manager were talking and basically said, well, if you're on a stream or anything like that, it's going to be a shot that no one's ever going to forget if it comes off. It will be the best 9-darter in history, surely. If something like that comes off, it would just be amazing. So I've attempted it a lot of times since.
Well, hopefully you'll get it one day, and you've had a few call-ups to the Pro Tour as well this year as one of those top-up players from the Challenge Tour. You had a quarter-final run back in March. Has it felt different going into those events? I guess not having that pressure of playing with a tour card, can you approach them with a bit more freedom, or is it still that same pressure of wanting to do well no matter what the circumstances are?
I think I learnt how to approach them like sort of the back end of the year when I had my tour cards. Obviously, I made the final and a semi-final and a quarter-final that year. Like I had some good runs. I think I made a few board finals, and I think I won my board a couple of times. It was nice to get back there and just. I basically just transferred what I learned from having a tour card when I got back there. Obviously, I had the one call up for Leicester, which was a very last minute call, which I got there and I didn't play very well at all. But the next few times I played, I thought I've got to win each time, or like we said, made the quarter final of the last event. It's stuff I'd already learned. It wasn't a case of going in there and being nice and relaxed because it's not the be all and end all. It's because I'd already had some experience from doing it previously.
And away from the Oki, congratulations are in order to you and your partner Bethany on getting married a few weeks ago. Our colleague Matthew Kiernan, he was there, and we joked with him asking when's the vlog coming out, but he said it was a great day. So it's been a pretty memorable few weeks, getting married, going on your honeymoon and winning in Denmark at the weekend.
Absolutely crazy few weeks, absolutely mental. I mean, me and Beth got married. Great day. There was only one very small hitch of her transport not turning up to actually get to the ceremony, which wasn't great, but it all got sorted out in the end. Then a honeymoon in Mexico, which was nice. Didn't throw a dart for a week. Come back 2-3 days later, go to Denmark. I found a little competition in Denmark on the Friday night before the main competition on the Saturday, and I went and played in that and won it. Which it was just like a little, a small darts club, the Baltic Darts Club, I think it's called. Give them a little shout out because they definitely got me ready for the Saturday. It was nice to go somewhere and warm up before the actual event. I'm really glad that I actually went and done something before the main play started. It was a good idea.
Yeah, it turned out well. We should mention your current dart setup as well. We know you love to tinker with it, but it appears that you've struck on something special with the new Condor Axe 120s, the all-in-one flight and stems. They've only just come onto the market, these new ones. So talk to us about why you switched to them and what a difference they've made to your game.
I mean, people that have been watching my game closely just lately, like from the modus and things like that, will see that I'm getting a lot of darts on the floor. I'm getting a lot of like bounce outs and fall outs, and it's not, a lot of the time it's not because I've changed how I'm gripping or holding the dart. Obviously with an all-in-one system there's the problem of deflections and things like that, but with this 120 system I think it's eliminated a lot of the deflection problems. Where the gaps in the flight are a bit bigger, you can it's almost like if this flight lands right in the treble 20, it's almost like a bucket and it makes it hard to miss. I mean, we're in the final against Jimmy Van Ski. As soon as my first dart was in the treble 20, I followed it with one or two more quite a few times. I think I had 4 180s in the final, which isn't a bad return considering there was 7 legs played.
No, it's pretty good going, and you signed up with Condor in January, but you're still also with Mission, who make your darts. They've been running a weekly series talking about practice routines. What are some of your favourite routines you like to do at the moment?
At the moment, I use the Scolia an awful lot. I use the Scolia system a lot. Whether it's playing tournaments, playing against the bot on it. Also, me and my manager talk. If there's something I'm struggling with, I'll ask Brian what he thinks, and he'll say, right, go throw 100 darts at double 16 or 100 darts at double top, depending on the thing that I'm struggling with. So a lot of the time I keep my practice very simple. It's normally 501s or 121s. Sometimes I just do round the clock on doubles and things like that. But if I'm struggling with something, Brian is always the man to ask to help out with a practice routine, that's for sure.
Well, we also saw your Twitter profile. It's already been updated to say that you are the Denmark Open champion, so it's obviously a title that means a lot to you. And looking at the history of the event, first held in the 1970s, some of the previous winners, John Lowe, Eric Bristow, Phil Taylor, Gary Anderson, the list goes on, and now your name is on there too.
I know, it's lovely, isn't it? It's not a bad group to be a part of. I think talking of Brian again, he sent me the previous winners. He sent me I think it was a list of the people that had won it previously, and I was like, wow, that's a good list to be a part of. It was just littered with world champions.
Well, you mentioned that final against Jimmy Van Ski, the 6-1 win, and fair to say you saved your best until last, a 98 average in that final, and we saw he lifted you up to celebrate after you won that last leg. So what was it like being that tall for those few seconds?
I nearly got a nosebleed. It's surprising what the world looks like from up there.
And that win, it's got you a spot, as we mentioned, back at the Lakeside. You were there in 2022 then as a tour card holder, and you've said to us before there was a lot of things about that day that you'd change. You maybe arrived to the venue earlier, getting a practice on the stage. So if you do end up back there in December, how determined are you to make up for that debut 2 years ago and bring your best game to the stage?
I just have to win one game. If I win one game, the biggest mistake I have made will be erased. That's what I'm hoping anyway. I just want the one. I mean, me and Brian were talking, and me and Beth have been talking as well about trying to get a seeding for Lakeside. Sort of, I'd quite like to be seeded for it, so I don't go in at the first round and play best of 3 again, because I don't think that done any favours. So we were talking about it, and we need to try and get a few more WDF tournaments to try and nick a seeding if we can. So I think it'll be a wise decision, even though I've got quite a few other things I have to play in at the minute.
Definitely, yeah. I was going to say, you've just won this title, it's got you to Lakeside, but there's still an awful lot of darts still to be played this year. You've still got 3 weekends of the Challenge Tour, not too far off that second spot for Ali Pally, but it sounds like the focus is going to be on trying to get that seeding for Lakeside and go in at that second round.
I think the focus is just going to be play as well as I can for as long as I can. That's the main focus. So no matter what I play in, I should be ready to do something at the events I'm in. So whether it's Modus, whether it's Challenge Tour, whether it's WDF, it's just about being ready for the events as and when they come up. So my goal for the Challenge Tour is obviously to try and get my tour card back through that. If I don't, go to Q School. If I don't get my tour card back, then hopefully I'll do well enough at the Lakeside or other WDF events to get back into some of their tournaments next year. So there's lots of things that I've got to do to try and create backups and things. So it's going to be a very busy darts calendar for a little while, I think.
Yeah, a busy time ahead. And lastly, before we let you go, probably most importantly, we see you've joined the growing trend of players on TikTok. You've said that 10,000 followers, that's the target, but how long before you take over from Stephen Bunting as the main man on Darts TikTok?
I reckon next week. Next week, maybe the week after, if he lends me a few thousand followers.
Well, good luck with that, Connor. It's great to always have you on the show, and congratulations again on winning the title at the weekend and on getting married as well, and wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Thank you very much for having me, as always.
Thanks again to Connor for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with the mailbag. But before we do, it's a special occasion. We are recording this on a Thursday evening here in the UK, which means we do have the draw for the European Tour event this weekend. So the draw's out for Kiel. Which first round and potential second round ties are you most looking forward to watching this weekend?
Well, it's a weird moment where the ties I picked out for the second round, or the potential ties, I should say, involve the matches I've also picked out for the first round. So you'll hear a lot of names twice, but I do want to start with one match for the first round and one for the second round that don't overlap. And the first round tie I'm picking out is Thibaut Tricol versus Andrew Gilding. And it might not be one you would have thought I would pick out a couple weeks ago. You know, I've always been high on Tricol. Obviously Lakeside finalist a few years ago. And a player who's now finally has a tour card and is finding his feet in the PDC. But he's a player who is absolutely good enough. And he's a player who I think in the long term will make it in the PDC. I think he's a player who will become a top 64 player at some point. Maybe he'll have to go to Q School a second time after dropping off the tour first. But I think he's a player who has top 64 capabilities, and he's only going to get better the more he plays in the PDC. But Andrew Gilding's a tough cookie as well. And this is not the Andrew Gilding of even a month ago, where it looked like he was just starting a fall down the rankings and briefly fell out of the spots for the World Match Play. Andrew Gilding has had a couple of good weeks in a row now. He finally won a match on the Euro Tour. He had some very, very good results this past weekend in the Players' Championship event. It looks like he's getting back, and it looks like the pressure of qualifying for the World Match Play has lifted his game and lifted his motivation to drive on. I think that's a very good first-round tie because both of those players are capable, and both of them have a lot of building to do for the rest of the year. And I'm going to mention one other second-round tie that does not involve a first-round tie I picked out, and that's Stephen Bunting against the winner of Andy Bottens and Gabriel Clemens. We've talked a bunch about Bunting recently. I don't think I need to say any more. Andy Bottens was the easy pick for the most likely person to come through Euro Q School and gave us a little bit of a scare, but he got through. Hasn't been consistent yet in the PDC, but is a player that I think a Tricol, I'm going out on a limb saying is a future top 64 player. Andy Bottens always looked like one. and, getting to see him on the Euro Tour will be good. But Gabriel Clemens is also coming back into form. He's finished last year slow. He started this year even slower. But again, like Gilding in the last month, has been playing much better. And I think this is a very tricky tie for Bunting, regardless who he goes against. And then I'm going to say 3 more matches just quickly, because they're great first-round ties, and they're going to be great second-round ties. Luke Woodhouse against Ryan Joyce. Joyce, a great run to the final. And Luke Woodhouse trying to make sure he qualifies for the World Match Play for the first time, and the winner of that is set to go against Ross Smith, who only made a Euro Tour final recently. Those are all 3 players who would have thought going into this that if the draw was kind to them, they'd have every chance to make it to the final session, and only one of them will even make it to the final day. Similarly, Richie Headhouse against Nathan Aspinall. Those are 2 players that right now could win this event. They're going against each other first round, and then they have to go against Johnny Clayton in the next round. Tough draw for Clayton, who's been uneven so far this year. But boy, those are going to be some interesting matches. And then finally, we talked about one of these guys already. And if you would have asked me which of the 3 was the most likely, I would have said up to this point in the show, it would not have been the one that it is. And that's Wessel Nijman, who's going against Luke Littler. And if he wins that, Michael Van Guren. Weird that that's the draw. And the only one we had mentioned on the show before right now was Wessel Nijman. But that's going to be an interesting match against Luke Littler. And obviously another interesting match, whoever wins that, against MVG.
Some great picks there. And I particularly like that first one, Thibaut Turcot, Andrew Gilding, just for the walk-ons, because I think Thibaut's got one of the best ones, and we all have a bit of Spandau Ballet gold as well from Andrew Gilding. But looking at the draw, we have got just 7 events left before that cut-off for the World Match Play. We spoke about it on last week's show, so I won't go too much into that. But one game I have to pick out is James Wade against Neil Zonneveld, Friday afternoon, last game of the session. If James Wade can win that game, he will go back above Callum Reed's into that last spot on the Pro Tour list for the match play. Callum Reed's not in Kiel this weekend, and 2 other players in that chasing pack. You mentioned one of them, Gabriel Clemens against the Lakeside champion Andy Bartons. Then you've also got Mike De Decker facing one of the newest Euro Tour winners, Martin Schindler. So they've both got 2 very tough looking draws there to pick up some extra money towards that race to Blackpool. And both those ties on Friday evening, and it's a really interesting lineup in that session. You've got Daryl Gurney against Dimitri van den Berg. We spoke about that World Cup race for Northern Ireland earlier with Brendan Dolan. Brendan, he'll be up against Jermaine Watermina in the afternoon. Daryl playing in the evening, so there could be some permutations there. 2 other games, you mentioned both of them, Richie Headhouse, Nathan Aspinall, Luke Littler, Wessel Nijman, 2 Premier League players. They're going to go off as the favourites, but I think it's fair to say both have got their hands full in their first round games. Neither is going to have it easy, are they? Richie Headhouse in the form of his life. Wessel Nijman, we spoke about him a lot on the show this week, just banged in that record average on the development tour in a final. And this matchup with Luke Littler could have very nearly have been what we saw in the World Youth final last year. Wessel lost out 6-5 in the semi-finals to Gian Van Veen. So this will be the first big stage meeting between these 2 players. And I was looking back at their record between each other. They have played 6 times away from the cameras on the development tour last year. Wessel's record won 5 of the 6 games, and in 5 of those 6, he's averaged between 95 and 101. Luke Littler, the one game he did win against Wessel Nijman, won it with 109 average. So if these 2 are both firing, that could be fireworks, and that is the last game on Friday evening to finish off that first round. And as you touched on, the reward, if you want to call it that, is to play Michael Van Guren on Saturday night. So that's quite the draw just to make the last 16 in that final day. And just lastly, a few other potential second round ties. You could have a battle of the Dutchman, Danny Noppert, Raymond van Barneveld, possibly Dave Chisnell against Chris Dobie. Will be a high scoring contest. And another one potential is Damon Hetter's Jan Van Veen. Those 2 have had some great battles in the past. So, yeah, it's looking like a really good lineup for the weekend.
And we'll finish off the show with one listener question from the mailbag. This comes from Big G180. Can you see the Pro Tour eventually going regional with some sort of Super League to help encourage more semi-pro players who maybe don't want to risk all the traveling to the UK?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the only events we see on at the same time at the moment, just looking in terms of the calendar, there's not a great deal of crossover. So you might have a a women's series on the same weekend as a Euro Tour. You might have a development tour the same weekend as a European Tour event. And I mentioned that clash earlier, 2013, the Masters, when the top 16 played in that, and there was Players' Championship events the same weekend. So I think one day the PDC, they would like to be running multiple events on weekends so the players can pick and choose which ones they go to. But I think that is a little while off at the moment. We see it in sports at the moment. I think tennis and golf, I don't follow them that closely, but you do see them running multiple tournaments on the same weekend, competitions same weekends. But I think darts, it probably have to get a lot bigger to reach that point where you are running the same level of tournament, one in England, maybe one in Germany, maybe one perhaps in America, just as an example. But I think it's a great ambition to have. The more darts, the better. And it would mean more playing opportunities for more players, more money in the game. But right now, I think it is a long-term vision, and there's probably other steps the PDC are looking to take to continue growing the game, and in particular with that Pro Tour.
Yeah, and I think I can't recall if it was last week or the week before where we talked about something similar. And I mentioned, I think the ideal eventually would be to have 4 Players' Championship events on consecutive days. And then bring them to other places where there's events. The lead up to the World Series event in New York or wherever it is in the future, you could have 4 Players' Championship events, so the entire tour comes, and then do similar in Australia. And the calendar allows for that. And especially once you reach the 40 Players' Championship events, which I think should have at least eventually come as the prize money increases and the PDC has the money to pay out those many events. Have those, to have 10 weeks of the year where you have 4 events each time, or at least, maybe 5 weeks where there's 4 events and then the other weeks where there's 2 or 3 to get to that total of 40. You can have those events there. But I think that's what's going to be the result. I don't think splitting off and having ranking events in the US at the same time that there's ranking events elsewhere is anywhere in the near future. And it doesn't even seem to really make sense that way. Yes, it's a risk to go play in the UK, but the prize money's there. And if you're good enough, then it's worth taking that risk, I think, or at least it's worth considering taking that risk. And I think that's the way it should be. Anything else for this week?
Well, a few thank yous. Got to say thank you to our guests for joining us, to Connor and Glenn for their time this week. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner and Condor Darts. Links in the description. Do go and check them out. And if you've listened this far, you're going to be the first one to know about a competition we're going to be running. It is a chance to win Connor Scutt's darts setup. Thanks to our sponsors, Darts Corner and Condor Darts. You can win a set of Connor's Mission V2 darts and a set of clear short Condor Axe 120 flights, the newest flights from them on the market. All you got to do is share our podcast, whether that's on Twitter or Facebook, and reply #EnjoyTheDarts. So good luck with that. We'll pick a winner at random. And just lastly, thanks to everyone for listening. Thank you for the continued support of the show. We'll be back next week. We'll be looking back at this weekend's Euro Tour. And as it is the last week of the regular season in the Premier League, we better chuck in some Premier League chat too. But until then, only one thing to do. I've already said it, and that is make sure you enjoy the darts.
I guess I need to call in ill for the next couple weeks, or at least fall ill midway through the recording, so that I can't answer those Premier League questions. No, I can. I do plan to watch the last couple weeks because at least then it starts to matter. But yeah, so we'll be back next week, as Alex said, to recap the Premier League. To recap the Euro Tour and look ahead to the last couple weeks of Premier League, and look ahead as well to everything else over the next couple months. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about. Keep sending in the questions. And until then, hang tight.